That's really okay. So I started my Dharma practice in sincerity probably about 20 years ago. And in that time, I've really tried to devote my energies to helping people, particularly in addiction recovery and prisons, to realize a life free of addiction and suffering. I trained as a counselor, as a psychotherapist, and as a mindfulness teacher, and have been studying mostly in the Soto Zen tradition of Buddhism over that time under the teacher Reb Anderson, who is a Dharma student of Shunryu Suzuki, the author of Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, who founded the San Francisco Zen Center. I'm currently a chaplain and have been a prison chaplain for the past 10 years to the UK Prison Service and visit Buddhist prisoners. And I'm also now working as a director of the Gaia House Insight Meditation Retreat Center. And I'm really grateful to be invited to talk to you today. So thank you. And if you're willing to, I would love to start with a period of maybe 10 minutes mindfulness practice together to help ourselves to ground and come into this present moment. So please make yourself comfortable. So if you'd like to find a position that holds you upright, but is at the same time grounded and releasing, letting go. Please draw your attention to the sensations in the body. Noticing. Being present to the points of contact between our skin and the support beneath us. Pressure, temperature, noticing areas of openness, areas of contraction. And then maybe drawing the attention to the feeling of the movement of breath in the body. Seeing if you can sense the physical changes as you inhale and as you exhale. Training attention to the moment by moment sensations in the body. Seeing if we can sense each moment of each breath. Even attending to the transitions between out-breath and in-breath. The momentary pause between in-breath and out-breath. We're not looking for anything clever, anything special. Just the simplicity of sensing breathing. Being present for the whole breath. And the next breath. And letting go. And present for the bell. Thank you. So I've been invited to talk today as part of the Buddhist Recovery Network Academy. And the title I offered was Living an Authentic Life. And if you read the brief I suggested for the outline of the talk, I highlighted how a life free of craving and addiction isn't just about being free of intoxicants, but could be about living a full and authentic life. And highlighted some research that looked at levels of life satisfaction in people who were in recovery in comparison to people who had not had issues with addictions. And that had suggested that although people in recovery maybe suffer more, have more difficulty in the first year of their recovery, people in longer term recovery are on average very often happier, have a better sense of contentment in life than the general population. Which leaves the question, what is it about recovery that maybe leads people to be more content? And the research doesn't answer this question, but I wonder if having a practice, engaging in a program of self-study and change, making the effort to reflect on oneself and be willing to change, might have something to do with this. And as authors like Darren Littlejohn and Kevin Griffin have highlighted, that there are links between the 12-step recovery path and the Buddhist path. And one can walk a recovery path along the lines of the Buddhist teaching. But also the 12-step path, even if it's walked outside of the context of the Buddhist teaching covers a lot of the same ground. And I wanted to talk today a bit about how we might learn to live on this authentic life with the guidance of the Buddhist teaching. One of the reasons I've found myself so embedded in the Buddha's path, I think, is because the teachings are so clear to me. I find the practices very real, practical, and accessible to me. I'm not being asked to believe something for my own salvation. I'm being offered a practice which realizes truth, which realizes the authentic life. And I think there's something that maybe most of us, or maybe all of us, resonate with, you know, when we think about living an authentic life. I think that's what we want, to be genuinely who we are. And what is that? The word authentic shares the root with the word author, somebody who originates a work. But how does our life originate? Who's the author of the work? The Buddha taught what's called Dharma, and Dharma has many translations, one of which is the teaching of the Buddha, the most common translation maybe. But Dharma is also like phenomenon, or how things are, or maybe reality, or the practice of reality. So the Buddha was teaching, as best as he could, how things actually are. And I don't think this is just a Buddhist endeavor. I think many traditions try to teach us how things actually are so that we can live an authentic life in alignment with how things are. I think how things are transcend any individual philosophy or religion. The founder of the modern mindfulness movement, Jon Kabat-Zinn, said that if it's Dharma, it cannot be exclusively Buddhist any more than the law of karma, any more than the law of gravity is English because of Newton. For it to be Dharma, it cannot be exclusively Buddhist any more than the law of gravity is English because of Newton. Gravity is not Newtonian. Dharma isn't Buddhist. Dharma is how things are, and gravity is how things are. So the Buddha is trying to teach us this, I think, how things are. I mentioned the 12-step recovery program earlier, and one of the central components of this is seeking to guidance or alignment with a higher power. If you want this, you have it, the Dharma, reality. The practice of living in accordance with reality seems to me to be something that's higher or more profound or more deep than our superficial idea of ourselves. I think our deluded selves are a problem, but if we can align our deluded self with reality, that's freedom. So the Buddha was teaching that we can learn the Dharma, we can learn to understand how things are and learn to live in alignment with the Dharma through a process, through both practice and through study. So we need to, if we're going to practice the Dharma, we need to study reality. And we were offered some tools, some practices, some techniques in the Buddhist tradition, practices of making effort, of mindfulness, of training concentrated awareness, of meditation, so that we can understand. it's very easy to go through life not really paying attention, and as such not really learning. If you're like me, you may have spent many hours at school staring out the window and daydreaming and not really learning a lot of the lessons that were on offer. As an adult, I've learned from my mistakes, I think, a little, and I try to pay attention a bit more now. And in paying attention, I get to understand how life is and how I am. But it doesn't happen just because I want it to. It happens because I make the effort to develop a sustained attention, to be mindful. So I mentioned earlier about living an authentic life, and authenticity being related to the author and to the originator of the story. And the Buddha had something to say about who that was. He said that the nature of reality is something that's been translated as codependent origination. That everything, particularly including us, exists in dependence on other things. And so we can study this, we can study the Buddha's literary teachings that have been left behind. But if we really want to understand dependent origination, if we really want to understand what he's talking about, when he points out that everything is other dependent, everything exists in dependence upon other things, we need to pay attention to that in our experience. So wisdom has an understanding component, if you like, a cognitive component, but wisdom also has a behavioral component. And it's a bit like if you know that smoking's bad for you, but you carry on. Well, that's not wisdom. But if you know that smoking's bad for you and you stop, that's wisdom. So we need to live in alignment with our understanding, and that maybe takes some effort. So this wisdom and practice that we're talking about that the Buddha offered is one of study and practice. It's one of living in accordance with our understanding and developing and deepening our understanding through practice. The Buddha was so emphasized dependent origination that he said it in the Majjhima Nikaya that one who sees dependent origination sees the Dharma, and one who sees the Dharma sees dependent origination. And I think he's using the Dharma in that context to say how things are, and my teaching. One who sees my teaching sees how things arise in dependence on other things. And one who sees how things arise dependent on other things sees my teaching. And he goes on to elaborate about how the five khandhas, or the five aggregates, everything that we might think of as us or ours, as me or mine, whether that be forms, physical forms, sensations, perceptions, volitions or intentions, consciousness, anything that we think of as us or ours, arises dependently. Again, in the Majjhima Nikaya, he says, and these five aggregates, affected by clinging, are dependently arisen. The desire, indulgence, inclination, and holding on these five aggregates, affected by clinging, is the origin of suffering. The removal of desire and lust, the abandonment of desire and lust for these five aggregates affected by clinging, is the cessation of suffering. So the Buddha here is talking about the first noble truths of suffering and the origin of suffering. That if we attach to anything that we think of as us or ours, if we cling to or hold to anything that we think of as us or ours, this is suffering. However, abandoning identification and clinging, abandoning craving to these aggregates, anything we think of as us or ours, this is freedom. And our life and who we are is other dependent. Everything that the rest of the universe isn't, we are, in one sense. You might think of it that way. And we're given our life by the whole universe. In this very moment, you're listening because I'm speaking, or because there's a recording of my speaking playing. You're sitting or standing or lying because there's air to breathe. The world is being kept at this temperature by the sun, the forces of the atmosphere. Everything's coming into place right now, just as it is, to allow this moment to be as it is. Your life in this moment exists solely because everything else is just in its place. And it can only be this way because everything else is the way it is. And something else changes, and to that degree you change. And this is the case for everything. But we kind of live as if it wasn't. Our deluded life lives as if there's something fixed and permanent here which is separate from the rest of the universe. And because we think that way, we suffer. We attach to a fixed self in a world where the self is completely dependent on everything else and always changing. So in a universe where the self is continually being given, where the self that we are is given to us moment by moment, we can either be ungrateful and complain and wish there was some other life right now that was available and suffer. We could attach to some idea of a self that is somewhere else. Or we can be grateful. We can say thank you for the life we've been given in this moment. And the Buddha, I think, taught gratitude and generosity because that is reality. In reality, who you are is given to you in this moment, and you in turn give your life to everything else in the universe to make it the way it is at the same time. This life of gratitude and generosity is the life of reality. It's how things are. And if we resist, we suffer, and probably those around us do too. In a sense, we are inherently selfless. There really isn't anything that we own, that is us, in addition to everything the universe is giving us in this moment. We are selfless beings, yet we may be ignorant of that and grasp at a fixed self, at something that is in addition to the universe and separate. We may be ungrateful, we may be not generous, and we ignore the selfless nature of the universe, and that's stressful. We're in opposition to how things actually are. So really the only sane response, as I say, to a life that's being given to us in this moment is living a life of gratitude and generosity. Our life requires everything to be just as it is, and we can learn to think and to speak and to act from that selfless place. But it takes some training. The 13th century Zen master Eihei Dogen, in his essay The Genjo Koan, said to study the Buddha way is to study the self. And to study the self is to forget the self. And I think he means to forget the separate, deluded self. But we can't just forget the self until we have studied it so intimately that it doesn't hold us in trance anymore. We need to really study the self before we can let it go. In the Udana Sutta, the Buddha was teaching a yogi called Bahir, and he gave an instruction to Bahir. When Bahir asked him for teaching, he said to Bahir this very trained yogi, he said, "Bahir, train the mind thus. In the seen, there is just the seen. In the heard, there is just the heard. In the sensed, only the sensed, and in the cognized, only the cognized. When for you, there is in the seen, only the seen, in the heard, only the heard. In the sensed, only the sensed, and in the cognized, only the cognized. Then there is no you in connection with this, and there's no you in connection with that. There's no you here, and there's no you there. You are neither here nor yonder, nor between the two, and this alone is the end of suffering." So both this Mahayana teacher, this later Buddhist school teacher, Dogen, in Zen school, saying, study the Buddha way, study the self, forget the self. And this earlier, these Pali teachings that are so held sacredly by the Theravada school, the Buddha's saying, train the mind thus. In the seen, there's just the seen. And when it's like that for you, you're not here or there or anywhere in between. You realize your selfless self. So to live an authentic life, to be who we really are, we need to realize selflessness. One of my favorite descriptions of how this happens was written by Marjorie Williams Bianco in The Velveteen Rabbit. So you may have heard this, but I'd love to read it now, if I may. She writes, "Real isn't how you're made," said the skin horse. It's a children's story. "It's a thing that happens to you. When a child loves you for a long, long time, not just to play with, but really loves you, then you become real." "Does it hurt?" asked the rabbit. "Sometimes," said the skin horse, for he was always truthful. "When you are real, you don't mind being hurt." "Does it happen all at once, like being wound up?" he asked, or bit by bit?" "It doesn't happen all at once," said the skin horse. "You become. It takes a long time. That's why it doesn't happen often to people who break easily, or who have sharp edges, or who have to be kept carefully. Generally, by the time you're real, most of your hair has been loved off, and your eyes have dropped out, and you get loose in the joints, very shabby. But these things don't matter at all, because once you're real, you can't be ugly, except to people who don't understand. And so the Buddha's teaching of the Four Noble Truths of suffering, and the cause of suffering, the end of suffering, and the path to the end of suffering, outlined this path of wisdom and ethics and meditation. And the practice of meditation, of making an effort, of paying attention mindfully, of developing concentrated awareness, is paying attention in class. It's studying how things are. And this practice is realized through ethical action, through right speech, through right action, through right livelihood. Not only because when you understand things, how things are, you will be selfless and ethical, but also the very effort to act selflessly and ethical will help you to realize your delusion. What do we become awakened of? What do we become enlightened about when we study? I don't think we become enlightened about enlightenment. I think when we study, what we become enlightened about, what we awaken to, is to our illusions, to our delusions. Through studying how we are, we realize how we misperceive the world. And if we make an effort to be selfless, to speak truthfully, to act in a way that recognizes the non-separation between ourselves and others, then we can notice when we're not doing that. And when we notice that, we can question, what's going on here? How am I seeing the world that allows me to speak untruthfully? How can I perceive the world in a way that leads me to take things which aren't being given to me, or to harm others, or to put myself above others, or put myself below others? When we make an effort to be selfless and kind, to be generous and grateful, we can notice when we're not, and we can feel the pain of that. And it's not the kind of pain we need to beat ourselves up about. It's a kind of learning pain. which we can hold with this non-attached awareness and be transformed by. The pain of our deluded action can transform us when we truly embrace it, when we don't avoid it through judgment, through intoxication. And there's a wisdom that arises from this study program. The 13th century Zen master Devin, who I mentioned earlier, went on from saying to study the Buddha ways, to study the self, and to study the self is to forget the self, and said that to forget the self is to be realized by all things, or to be awakened by all things. When we truly see delusion as delusion, we call this awakening or enlightenment. To know that a deluded thought is a deluded thought. We no longer maybe see the world so much as a situation of me going into the room and seeing the room, but the room comes forward and realizes me. We maybe don't see the world in quite such a one-sided way anymore. We can open to a world that is co-created, a self that isn't just enacting upon the world, but the world enacts upon. So the practice of authenticity, the practice of reality, as I said earlier, is a practice of receiving our life as it's given to us in this moment, and a practice of giving, practice of gratitude and of generosity. And this is only realized, reality is only realized when we practice it. So in this spirit, the Buddha's teachings are realized in the practice of gratitude and generosity, both in a spiritual, but also in a very real and practical way. The Buddha and his disciples have been offering the Buddha's teachings for the last 2,500 years, and these teachings are freely given. But it's only been possible because those people who are giving the Buddha's teachings are living a life of gratitude and generosity, and the people who receive the teachings are living a life of gratitude and generosity. And without people putting food into the Buddha's bowl, the Buddha would not have been able to teach. And this has gone on for many hundreds of years since then. So in that spirit, if you would like to continue to support the turning of the Dharma wheel, you are invited into this practice to support the Buddhist Recovery Academy by following the link that was posted with this talk at www.buddhistrecovery.org/academy.htm and make an offering. So thank you so much for all your attention and time and generosity. I really open to any feedback or comments or questions that you might have.
So you can type your questions or comments into the chat field or raise your hand with that. Just let us know that you'd like to come on live, or just turn your video on. Love to see who's joined us here today. So, Devin, I have kind of a question that I often think of, and I'm wondering if a lot of times in the finest moments of sobriety, I'm seeing my own imperfections as part of this perfect moment of interconnectedness. And I've been curious as to whether or not this is an authentic seeing myself, or is it really just more egocentric response to suffering? And I'm just, I'm actually not sure whether that's a moment of progress or if it's more egocentricity. What do you think about that?
Oh, thank you, Robin. That is quite a profound question. I really appreciate you raising it, and I really understand where this is coming from. That we do have a tendency to question how am I getting on? Am I making progress? Is this awareness of my defilements, awareness of my ignorance or selfishness progress, or is this just me kind of patting myself on the back? Is that kind of your question, Robin?
That is my question.
yeah. And in a way, I feel like I wonder if it's more helpful to just to not attach to trying to answer the question. I suspect that if there's a grasping at needing to know, maybe there's a discomfort behind the not knowing. Because I think our minds want to get a hold of ourselves. I think that's a very natural human tendency to get a sense of who we are, to think, I'm this, I'm making progress or I'm not making progress, I'm enlightened or I'm deluded. To me, I think that's a symptom of the human condition, which doesn't make it wrong. It's just the human condition, but not to wholeheartedly buy into that question, to not wholehearted to grasp after an answer. I know that the early Buddhist teachings, the Buddha says things like, "I'm the world-honored one." I've awakened, and so many of the Buddhist students walk around wondering things like, "Am I awakened?" But it feels to me that my sense is that that can be a distraction, that kind of language and that kind of thinking. And I don't know how much of the recorded Buddhist teachings have been accurately translated. But in my practice, I've found getting too involved in working out what I am, or if I'm right or wrong, and grasping hold of that's a distraction. But being open to the mystery, is this delusion? Well, it kind of seems deluded. Maybe I should say sorry to that person. Or was that skillful? It seemed kind of skillful. I better watch that. Yeah, maybe that was. So I think having the question is really healthy, but getting attached to the answer, maybe that's more of a problem than questioning.
Thank you.
Thank you, Robin. So if there are any concepts that came up in the talk that you felt like you'd like me to elaborate upon, I'd really open to hearing what would be useful. And you don't need to expose yourself. You're very welcome to just click on the little chat icon and just type in there something that you'd like to say. So would you want to read out this question for the sake of the podcast, Robin?
Are there meditations that you find to be more helpful than others for this studying oneself, an insight practice that you recommend, or any meditation that you find more helpful for living this authentic life?
Thank you. So my main practice has been what I call Zazen, or just sitting. But I don't know that that's the more helpful or the most helpful. It's the practice that I've been introduced to, that I've engaged with the most. But I also, as I said earlier, trained as a mindfulness teacher and teach secular mindfulness meditation and mindfulness in Buddhist contexts, which may be a little bit more focused than the sort of objectless awareness of Zazen. For me, it seems, in a way, the most important thing for a meditation to be meaningful is that there's an effort. And when I say an effort, there's a right effort. There's an effort which is oriented towards being present. And that usually requires a certain amount of stillness, maybe silence. I know some people who say that they kind of meditate regularly, listening to the radio or listening to music, or they meditate walking their dog. And the word meditation isn't exclusively Buddhist, but I think for a meditation to be Buddhist, it's usually maybe more helpful to think of it as a meditation which isn't trying to get anything, which isn't grasping at some alternate reality. And I think that characterizes Zazen for me. And I think if a mindfulness meditation or a jhana meditation or a metta meditation, a loving kindness meditation, I think whatever meditation one's engaging in, for it to be a Buddhist meditation, for it to be a meditation which is likely to cultivate awakening and to realize awakening, I think the practice is best giving up any grasping, giving up any agenda, and practicing the practice just for the sake of the practice. So if I'm practicing Zazen to become enlightened, or practicing metta meditation to have better relationships, or practicing concentration meditation to enter a formless realm of consciousness, that grasping will maybe more likely contribute to the solidifying of a sense of self. But if we can practice in an aware way that notices the grasping and lets go, that meditation, I think, is the meditation which realizes the authenticity. And I didn't know that's what what I would have said until you asked me. So thank you.
You're welcome. Where can we go to find you, to follow you, to catch more of your teachings?
Well, I don't have a regular slot anywhere, unless you live locally to the southwest of England, where you can catch up with me personally. And but I do have some meditations I've uploaded to a smartphone app called Insight Timer. So if you'd like to practice with some of my meditations, I've put those there, and I may at some point in the future upload some talks and further meditations there. So if you search for Devin Ashwood on Insight Timer, you may find me there. Other than that, if you do a web search for my name, you'll probably find me dotted about and can get in contact. You'd be very welcome. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. If there are any more comments or anything that you want to share, participants, please do add them, and it's not too late. But meanwhile, I would like to truly thank you, Devin, for helping to recover my very awkward introduction, which is one of the whole points that I'm here for. And to thank you for a really thoughtful and joyful teaching. Thank you also for your words about the practice of dana. And yes, just wanted to say that link is always there on our website. Any day is a good day to offer dana, and it will go towards growing this recovery community. I wanted to just put in a plug for this Buddhist Recovery Network Summit that we have coming up in September, from September 5th through the 8th. It's happening at the Gwenwood Retreat Center in Lacey, Washington. We've extended the registration period until the end of July. And there's some great teachers and panelists who will be there. We have Vimla Sara and Gary Sanders, Deborah Grace, Kevin Griffin, Sue Neffield Ellis, Brian Williams, Jean Tuller, and Vince Cullen. And I'm sure there will be other teachers there in attendance, just enjoying themselves on the retreat. So yeah, spaces are filling, but we did keep the registration open a bit longer, and I wanted to just share that website with you, where you can go to get the agenda and to register for the event. So next week we will have Joan Tollefson speaking, and that's not next week, next month, sorry. That's Sunday, August 4th. So I hope you join us, and Devin's talk will soon be a podcast, and if you go to the BuddhistRecovery.org website, there are links to all the podcasts there, so we welcome you to join us that way also. Thank you again, Devin, and thank you everyone who's been in attendance. May you be well and happy, and we appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, I'll leave the meeting room open for another 15 minutes or so you can copy links that we've left up. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Robin, for hosting this. I really appreciate it.
Thanks.